Hi, everyone. Good day. This is your teacher, Miss Mars, and I'm very excited because this video lecture, I am going to start talking and sharing with you all our final unit for our subject or our course, Language Learning Materials Development. And I believe this unit is very important, and at the same time, it's going to give us a lot of information that would allow us to develop materials in specific areas. I know we all are ready, thus, without further ado, let's begin. So now we are looking at our PowerPoint presentation now, and our Unit 4, the title of our Unit 4 is Developing Specific Types of Materials. Is what I told you. This unit would allow us to develop materials in specific areas. So we as learners, we have to realize the functions of the device, example, grammar, as a way of mediating words and context. And through that class, we would be able to really take a look into the meaning of a specific, topic that we look into, and at the same time, the meaning or the purposeful meaning of that specific device or material. In the context of language learning materials development, our device here is, of course, our material, the material that we use to teach English language to our learners. And there are so many devices out there that we can use. We have here a specific material that would focus on the grammar and grammar class. I believe that when we were in elementary, high school, we have a very common understanding on what grammar is all about due to the pedagogic books, okay, that we read and we were also told. And at the same time, commonly, because of all these things, we could, always associate grammar to or we could always associate grammar with syntax only. So, without us knowing that grammar is very broad, and that's why we have grammatical items, and under the grammatical items, we do have phonological items, we have morphological items, we have syntactic items, and the one under the semantics. So, with that, it's very specific now, and we are already, corrected about grammar because grammar class does not only talk about sentence, it doesn't only talk about syntax. So grammar in general would, look into the sound, would look into the word formation because all these aspects, they have rules, and also would talk about the sentence. And in the sentence, it's basically we spend so much time studying about syntax, about sentences, because it's just that it's really broad as well. For example, we start with the usage of articles, so very important. We also look into here, if we go with verbs, we know that there are so much things to consider under verbs. We have different stances, we also have adjectives, and then after all these things we do have conjunctions, prepositions, and after all that we should know how to combine them. And when we combine them, we go with the phrases and so on, and the list goes on and on under syntax. And it's very essential as well because in order for us to communicate, we really have to know how to create a sentence. And from there, we keep on creating, and up until we can come up with a discourse or with a paragraph and with a composition. And in terms of spoken, we could be able to really speak fluently if we know about grammar. And of course, without no need to mention about accuracy as well, because when we say grammar and you are very much conscious about grammar, that means you are pretty much really into the accuracy of the language used. So also we also know that mainstreaming now is letting our students, our learners really communicate the language. And that's why we follow a specific approach, which is communicative approach, allowing them to communicate without putting so much pressure in terms of grammar, okay? In terms of the conventions and the rules. That's our strategy class, so that our learners would be able to really express themselves, and that they won't have a lot of reservations or holdbacks, so that they will practice. Because if you put the student, in the box, and you are so very blatant, you're very blatant about them, committing mistakes, they would be intimidated, and that would, hinder them from communicating. Whereas if you don't, you are not that very much conscious, though you still correct them, but it's not like every single word or every time the student speaks and there is a mistake, you would always cut that student, and then that would really put him or her in a situation where he would be able to develop fear and so much consciousness. And if you are too conscious to do things, that would really hinder you to do it, right? So that is why we are mainstreaming communicative approach. But it does not also mean, class here does not involve rejection of grammar, but it does not also mean that though we really would want our learners to communicate so well, and we give them all the freedom, or we give them so much spaces for them to really speak and be engaged, does not also mean that we are rejecting grammar here, because it is also not good that students keep on, repeating mistakes, and they just, without somebody correcting them. So the thing that we could do is, of course, give a model to that student, how to do it, how to say it, and you do it repeatedly, so that he or she can imitate it many, can imitate it so easily. And if he or she can imitate, and then he would figure it out that, oh, I got mistakes. So that student have to unlearn what she thought was right, and then relearn to the new and the correct one that she or he got from you. So, and further, these are now the things, class, that we are going to discuss. Okay, these are the lessons that we are going to discuss under unit 4. And that is lesson 1 would look into the materials for the teaching of grammar. Okay, so grammar here is very much as, this is very generic or broad, okay, compared to the next lessons, because the next lessons are very really specific. Materials for teaching vocabulary. Materials, lesson 3. Lesson 2 would be all about materials for teaching vocabulary. Lesson 3 would be materials for developing reading skills. Lesson 4 would be materials for developing writing skills. Lesson 5 for developing speaking skills, and lesson 6 for listening skills. So that's why I mentioned earlier that unit 4 would allow us to really be able to know how to develop materials in specific areas. And these are now the things or the specific areas that we are going to explore on this unit. So now, let's go to lesson 1. And on this video lecture, we are going to focus on lesson 1. So lesson 1, class, is all about materials for the teaching of grammar. So as what I told you, grammar is really huge. It's broad. No, it does not only talk about the arrangement of words, but it would also talk about less, etymology. That's what I am telling you. Words itself, morphology. Okay. We'll also look into the morphological items here, even the dialogue. Okay. Or here, we have to be, really very specific here, that when we have dialogue, of course, we look into the sounds and the hyphens and dashes. These are our mechanics, okay? Capitalization, colons, clauses, conjunctions, so many things. words to be specific. And then, of course, we do have the syntax because we have to put all these things together. And we put all these things together, class. It does not have to be like, um, there are only rules in putting all these things together, but even in using each and every portion of, of a part of a sentence, there are also rules. For example, capitalization, that is just a portion when we are going to talk about syntactic items, right? So we have to follow the rules. And in fact, in the creation or formation of words, we also have we also have rules to follow. So these are rules are very much essential when we are going to create sentence and when we go further with this courses. So that's why grammar, it's a really broad. Okay, it is broad and should not just only be like talking about sentence. Okay, because sometimes, because of the pedagogic books that we read or we explored before, when we say grammar, it's just all about sentence, and sentence is just more on written. Okay, no spoken. So we have to correct that, because here grammar, learn the mechanics of language and how they function. It does not only talk about learn how to create sentences of a language, and that's what we have to correct ourselves. Okay, and then of course there are so many existing books or references about grammar. We have Oxford English Grammar course. Okay, in fact, here, oh, they have pronunciation for grammar or CD-ROM. This is really what I admire about international books, because all the things really, or most of them really have, you know, CD-ROM or maybe QR codes that you can just scan, and you will be guided with how it's read, how it's pronounced. And I believe it's very essential when we are teaching English or a language to the learners. And then much of the present position of grammar today with EFL, or the English as foreign language, in our case, as Filipinos, we consider English as a second language, is due to the inherent conservatism of ministries of education and at the same time, the major publishing houses. So, of course, conservatism, class, meaning they are very reserved. Diba? So that's why when we are going to take a look at the course books that we have, of course it has to go with what is prescribed by the ministries of education, and at the same time the major publishing houses, but also to the fact that the buyer of materials are not the learners. Why? Because learners don't actually buy so many materials, because simply because they don't have yet a budget. Okay, well, unlike those who really are rich, okay, because they buy books and all that. But if we are going to go with how, or the majority of the learners, of course these learners don't buy books, but who buy books are the teachers, those who are going to share the knowledge to the learners. So people who make decisions, as what I told you, those who buy books are the people who make decisions concerning syllabus and or book adoption. So obviously, as teachers, we do buy books because we are the one who creates syllabus. And that's where, because if we are only, or if we are the main buyer of books, if kita teachers class, we are the main buyer of books, so we have to consider really our learners when we buy books. But I don't know if when we are going to scan, or when we are going to take a look at the a table of contents in the just the, the general face, or like a summary of the book, I don't know if we consider the learners on top of our decision. Maybe somehow it's really like maybe because we thought that this is good for, well, something like that. Okay, but also we do consider our learners if we really think that, oh, my learners are they are of this level, and at the same time they are really, in terms of their interest, is this course book really good for them? So I believe also a lot of us, or a lot of us also thought of that, when we buy books. And also sometimes we just don't have any options at all, because when we go to the bookstore, there's not much wide array of options as to what book we are going to use. Sometimes too limited, too limited resources, and what we can, buy because it's the only thing available. So we don't really have a choice. And if we also purchase international books, that is also very heavy on our, pocket, right? Because it's really kind of expensive. So now we do have criteria for the creation of grammar materials. The first is, as the teachers who are going to create grammar materials, we have to consider, of course, the age and the level of the learners. And it's very important because if we don't consider, we might be giving books that is actually not good for senior high school students, but that book is already for college students. Or we may be able to give something that is actually only good for maybe only good for grade 2, but we are teaching already grade 4. So we have to really consider the age and the level of the learners and the extent to which any adopted methodology meets the expectations of learners, teachers, and the educational culture. We have variables here that we have to take a look into. Okay, expectations of learners. The teachers also have their own expectations. And at the same time, okay, always remember this class, at the same time, how about educational culture of the country where you are from? Because remember, Philippines is not different, it's not the same, rather, it's not the same from other Asian countries, even Southeast Asian countries. And specifically as well, Cebu Island is not similar with the ones in Metro Manila. Okay, especially if you are teaching in this in countryside, it's a bit difficult, or it's really different in a way or in a sense, no. And then the extent to which any context and co-text which are employed in order to present the grammar areas will be of interest to learners. So context specific, you know um, a topic that we are going to talk about in our material. And then when we create grammar materials, what are those specific contexts? When we say context, it's basically something that we already consider the reality here, or the day-to-day activities, the area, the location, the setting, okay? The setting of our learners. Because any context or wherever you are, basically we have different contexts. And most oftentimes, if we are not open to our differences, especially in contexts that where misunderstanding and of course quarrels would really, it's because of that. And then co-text, okay, which are employed so that we can present grammar areas that we know surely are of interest to learners. That's why I told you setting, because context class, if we could be able to really incorporate the best context to the specific group of learners that we have, then there is so much interest, because they could be able to relate. No, for example, you are talking about the specific language to our Filipino students. So we have to make sure that we relate it to our own culture. Okay? Because if we keep on talking to them foreign culture, imagine gani, we discuss English, diba? We teach them English language, but in our course books, tanan, it's all about US. Okay, it's all about the place in America. It's all about, because US is an English speaking country. Do you think we would be able to have interest? No, because students will not be able to relate. That's why in our course books, if you also notice, we have localized literature, diba? We have, for example, class, if you're going to check the creative write-ups of Cecilia Manguera Brainard, she is a very good writer. I met her when I was asked to teach creative writing, and I got a book, created by Cecilia Manguera Brainard, and she has like a massive collection of her write-ups, and I really admire it because she was able to have her own voice. And how does How does she achieve it? Is by localizing all her stories to a specific location or to a specific place that she knows very much. And in her write-ups, she would always talk about, or she would always consider the setting that happened here in the Philippines, specifically in Cebu. So if you are the reader and you are a Cebuana or you are a Filipino, it would be so easy for you to relate to the text because you know the locations. You will be interested. But let's say if all of the time no we teach English, whatever grammar lessons it would be, we would always incorporate it to literature, and of every time it's just all about things in the other countries, so it's not gonna help. We will not be able to really catch the interest of our learners. If we could be able to catch their interest, then that would only give them so much interest to go or live in those countries, and there won't be any patriotism or patriotic attitudes from our learners. So that's why we are going to localize it. That is also the reason, class, why English now has so many variations. Diba? I told you about it. So many Englishes in the world, and Philippine English is one. And if we are going to compare Philippine English to American English, we would know really the difference that our Philippine English, obviously, it's embedded with the Filipino culture. Okay, so now let's proceed. Okay, another is the nature of the grammatical areas to be dealt. Okay, the nature of the grammatical areas to be dealt with in terms of their form, their inherent meaning implications, and how they are used in normally occurring spoken and or written discourse. So the nature of the grammatical areas to be dealt with. We have here form. Okay, so when we say form, these are now the conventions or the rules. Okay, so what are the nature of grammar if we talk about English language? Okay, lain-lain man kasi every language has a has different nature of grammar. And we could not say that English is similar with Cebuano Visayan, Cebuano Visayan is similar with English. Okay, we cannot say that. That's why we have to take a look at also the material that we are going to create should really know the nature of the grammatical areas that we are dealing in. Also the form, the meaning implications, and in spoken and or written, how are they used? How do they differ in spoken and unwritten discourse? And we also have to look into the extent to which any language offered to the learners for them to examine the grammar. Use represents realistic use of the language. So that is one. When we create materials in grammar, we have to also make sure we represent realistic use of the language. Okay. Not only like very bookish or very conventional, the extent to which activities for learners to produce language containing the target grammar will definitely result in meaningful adherences. And it's good to really have specific themes when we are going to discuss something in grammar, or maybe we create materials about how to teach grammar to our learners. And we have here difficulties that learners can be expected to encounter when learning these areas of grammar. So we need to think about our learners all the time. So for example, when we create our grammar materials, we have to make sure, class, that of course we would expect if they would be able to handle this area or this specific topic in terms of their level. Diba? Maybe it is too difficult for them. And at the same time, we should be able to draw the line uh, between those forms and functions, the relationship in terms of similarities and differences. We really have to draw the line because it may be that it may create confusion if students would not understand the similarities and differences, especially there are just so many irregulars out there. Okay. And not only that, drawing the line between also the target language and the mother tongue. It's something that should also be, considered. Now, our language for example, if one of a sign, we have to take a look at how is it, similar, and how does it differ with English language. We have to draw the line so that we would understand why we do it this way in one of a science and why we do it this way in our second language, or the target language being English. So we have to take note in creating grammar materials. One should consider giving varied grammar practices, as they are language practices as well. So when we create grammar materials class, we should not just talk about how to form it or what are the rules and the likes, but most importantly, we have to let the learners apply what they have learned by incorporating various grammar practices. Because if we let them do a lot of grammar practices, that means they are also practicing the language as well. Okay, so we have here some grammar practice as language practice, is what is mentioned in the previous slide. So practice exercises. So for example, we are going to develop a theme such as this will, no? That is what the learner should you know kind of really, that would be our themes. Di handa nag-focus. This will. Okay? Will class will be more complex for the materials writer to produce and for the learner to engage with. However, not to do so easily results in grammar practice, which is not language practice. So let us not forget that this will here, if this is our theme, how would we be able to create grammar practices out of this theme? Okay. It might be a little bit complex if you are the writer or if you are the material writer. And at the same time, the learner may have difficult to engage with this kind of theme, this will. But always remember, you have to find a way, because if we talk about this will, that means it's gonna be focusing about the future. Okay. And also, if we are not going to do, and if we are not going to allow our learners to really be able to have a grammatic naman, and if we are not going to, put our learners in situations where they will be exposed to the grammar practice that would develop this a theme, which is this will, then that means we are not giving them, or we are not allowing them to practice the language. Because remember, grammar practice should be considered as a language practice. So as teacher, we have to look for a way. Okay. It might be complex, or it might be deep, but how should we be able to make this as a theme? So we have to look into the similarities or synonym, diba? That would mean it's all about the future. So you could let the learners to talk about something that they anticipate that's going to be what that particular thing could do, or what somebody could do, or what something could do. So that's why they would be able, this will blah blah blah. So you could let them create advertisement, di ba? Pwede sila mag-advert. You will give them activity that would, allow them to advertise a product or something. Because if you let them advertise something, you would say, oh, this then the name of that thing or the item that they are advertising, this blah 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 will, okay, erase all the blackheads in your faces, or will erase all the scars that you have, including the ones in your heart. So char lang in a way. So those are the things, class. No, this will. And without you knowing it, students was able already to see, this is how we are going to use it and communicate this will. It might not be an easy theme, but at the same time, it's meaningful, and that is language practice. So from there, the students know that if they use this will, they are trying to communicate something that particular item can do for the future if they're going to use it or something. So that's the best, is to let them have an advertisement. Okay, so another activity that we could have would be about reported speech, or we have here direct speech, direct indirect speeches. So you could have it as a form of an examination. And there are just so many traditional areas of grammar which appear in virtually any grammar syllabus or list of contents and which do not need to be dealt with as separate areas and certainly not dealt with discretely. And one example to be looked at in is some detail here. We have the reported speech. We have to make sure that we could be able to really incorporate this in our grammar material as well. Because according to Willis in 1990, among others, has argued that it is unnecessary to treat this as an area of language with its own separate existence and set of rules because that is really incorporated. So this is not separate, but this is really part of the grammar, thing about language, about English language. And we do have here reported speech, have direct speech. As I told you, direct or indirect speech are the things that should also be considered class when we are going to make or create materials for grammar, for the teaching of grammar. We really need to know what are the different topics under grammar. It's really huge. It's a very, very broad subject, but you can focus as to what specific areas in grammar that you are going to tackle in your material. Okay, here you're going to create a monograph then. Okay, a monograph, it is a material that we can use in our, in language learning or language teaching. So these are the things. For example, we say reported speech. We do have here direct speech, reported speech. The direct speech would be present and simple. The reported speech would be into past simple. If it's present continuous, the reported speech would be past continuous. If it's present perfect, it's going to be past continuous, past simple, past perfect simple, past continuous, past perfect continuous, past perfect, and past perfect. So these are the things. Now, let's try to take a look at a video so that we will be informed more about this portion of our lecture.
Tense changes in reported speech. Direct speech. Reported speech. Present simple. She always wears a coat. To past simple. He said that she always wore a coat. Present continuous. I'm looking for my keys. Past continuous. She said that she was looking for her keys. Present perfect. She has written 3 letters for her friend. Past perfect. He said that she had written 3 letters for her friend. Past simple. My friend gave me a bar of chocolate. Past perfect. He said that his friend had given him a bar of chocolate. Will. I will finish my report in 2 days. Would. He said that he would finish his report in 2 days. Can. I can speak English. Could. She said she could speak English. May. I may invite them to dinner. Might. She said that they might invite them to the dinner. Must. I must go to the bank and get some money. Had to. She said she had to go to the bank and get some money. Have to. I have to submit this assignment by 3 p.m. tomorrow. Had to. She said that she had to submit this assignment by 3 p.m. tomorrow.
All right, so now we're done watching the video, class, and obviously this video explains and gives us how tenses or verb tenses really change if we are having direct to reported speech or direct to indirect speech. So it's, part of the grammar, okay, part of grammar topics if we consider reported speech that should also be considered when we create materials for grammar. So the following table shows other examples of such changes. You could, explore this one. And direct speech reporting, it's actually just us giving the verbatim report of what someone said. That is why we need to have it in quotation marks. What someone said, you don't change anything word for word. That's why it's a verbatim report. But when we say indirect speech, you already said again what that person has said. So that's why you would always mention, he said, Maria said that. Okay, you're like reporting what the person said earlier. So that's why the tenses would change or change. Okay, so also in this video, it also showed us how it's gonna change if it's direct speech, and then we will change it into indirect speech. So it's very obvious, and also no need for me to really expound further about this since we had a lot of these topics already when we were in our lower years. Okay, when you guys are in your lower year. So if you look at what a speaker needs to do in order to produce an utterance in a recorded speech, we'll find things such as ability, the knowledge, ability, select a verb which reflects how the reporter views the original speech, such as say, tell, explain, suggest, admit, because you have to really also consider that. You cannot just say all the time, he said, she said, he said, she said, right? You can say that she explained that, okay, Maria suggested that, and the knowledge of the implications of the verb selection for the following structure, and the ability to refer to the periods of time. Okay, example, the day before, the following day, 3 weeks later, opposed to yesterday, tomorrow, in 3 weeks' time, and also to make other diacritic references as a remove at a remove. Example, the house is opposed to this house, etc. And then when the verb selected for reporting is followed by a, that, blah, 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 verb phrase, the ability to select an upright tense form for the verb and lie in the that clause. So these are the things that we have to consider when we incorporate reported speech, or when we put imported reported speech, of course, in our grammar materials. And then we have here some, exercises, as what is mentioned earlier. Grammar practice is language practice. You can have a grammar practice like this in your materials, and like this as well. This is very, very interesting, right? You can do like this, something that would allow the learners to just have fun, not only through, through exams, but at the same time, like this, through games. Okay, and also this could also do. Yeah, you could have a group activity like this one. Okay, and we have receptive grammar activities. When we talk about receptive, okay, um, these are the knowledge or the activities that would refer to knowledge of linguistic rules of learner or uses for listening or reading. So when we have listening or reading, that is receptive. Okay, when we allow our learners to listen, to read, that means we give them some receptive grammar activities. And maybe you would have a selection and let them read something, or maybe audio file and let them listen to something, and from there will be questions about that. And opposite of that one would be productive grammar activities, like for example writing and speaking. Okay, awareness raising, so it's a term which has recently acquired current currency in language teaching terminology. So the unifying feature behind all these commentators is the assertion that it is the student's ability to observe accurately and perceive similarity and difference within target language, which is most likely to aid the acquisition of the grammatical system. So as what is mentioned earlier, if you being the speaker, you know how to look at, or to extract the similar and the similarity and the difference of your target language and your mother tongue, or the native language, which is the Cebuano Visayan, that would mean you have awareness already. And if there is awareness, it would be easier for you to acquire and learn the language. With this theoretical framework, grammar as a receptive skill has an important role to play. And if we are going to consider this, awareness, raising, be able to have the perceive similarity and difference para maka-observe tas accuracy sa language nga atong gi-target, that is why we need to have the grammar as a receptive skill. Very important ang iyang gi-playing a role in order for us to really know or understand so well about the target language and that its difference in our native language. So when discussing receptive grammar, there are four main areas to consider. Ability to follow directions. Kay receptive man, of course, you have to really know how to follow directions. You have to understand the questions, understand the grammar and vocabulary. If you know all these, you can follow the directions, you understand the question, you understand the grammar and the vocabulary, then you would succeed to really understand and be able to grasp the target language so well, and the knowledge that would be stored in your brain is really flawless. I mean, you have all these, man. Receptive, it's something that we take in, okay, in order to understand the theory or the concept about it. When you say productive, we have to let it out. What we take in, of course, atong ipagawas. How do we let it out is through production. That's why we have some written activities and spoken discourses activities and the likes. And the receptive language activities, this could be, here activities that target receptive language skills, WH questions, and you can refer to this, okay? Following directions games, working memory, games with household objects. So you can just pause this and take a look at all these things, for you to know the details of these activities. But these are receptive grammar activities. Membership, okay, remember to have strong receptive language skills because a child needs to have a strong syntax, semantics, morphology, phonology, and pragmatic language skills. So we have to explore hundreds of pages of materials broken down by age, and we have to learn how to functionally support if you are having children with you or if you are a sibling, you need to know how to support a child's speech and language development throughout the day. And of course, as teachers, we have to know how to give such functional support to our learners. Brain activities and visual supports are also very important. Okay, so the questions here: what language learning materials do you need to conduct these receptive language activities? That will be the question that I am going to ask, or that you will expect. I will expect it to answer in our feedbacking. We will have our feedbacking, and then you have to take note on this question, class, because this will be the question you have to answer. So from now, you have to prepare an answer to this question because we will have an oral recitation during the feedbacking. No? What language learning materials do you need in order for you to conduct these receptive language activities? So you can choose. Please do choose one and give me the materials that you would need in order for you to conduct the receptive language activities, our activity being mentioned in the previous slide. Okay, just choose one because this is oral. All of you should be able to speak, and if you choose a lot, then that would, take so much time. So just choose one and tell me the materials, and of course you have to explain it why. Okay, so that's all for lesson one. Lesson one is all about the materials that we use for teaching, for the teaching of grammar to our learners. So thank you very much, class, for being so um, patient. And I hope you learned a thing or two. And I will see you on the next video lecture very, very soon. We will be talking about lesson two. And hopefully in that video lecture, we would also be able to discuss about lesson three. So thank you very much, class. And it's good to see you again. And I hope you all are in good condition. And God bless us all and keep safe, everyone. Bye-bye.